All right, so we are recording. Yeah, so we just wanted to talk about the kind of the state of Christianity in the West today, and how it's besides the fractured state of it, and the especially in America, the multitude of various all the various denominations and the splinters, and then the schisms within the church itself, the Roman Church, and sort of the rise. I noticed, I read an article yesterday about how that there was a sort of a bunch of a large number of young men who have begun getting baptized in like France. Spain was one of the other places that they mentioned. I forget where the article is. I can maybe link it in the comments when we post this. But I thought that was somewhat interesting. However, I kind of wanted to touch upon the aspect as why Christianity is sort of has been the faith of the West for 2,000 years, give or take now. Aside from the tough years during the early ages of it, but why at one point it was an excellent defense mechanism, and it sort of united Europe and united the West under sort of one dominion. And I realized the Reformation sort of changed that aspect quite a bit, and you had the wars of the 17th century. But yeah, I wanted to get into why is Christianity been why has it been sort of a rather than a defense mechanism, it's sort of failed in that nature, or has it failed? And what your guys' take on that? I guess.
Want to start it with one, or can I go?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah,
I'll take over after you've said your statement. I have a few things, but
sure, sure. So I guess we can cover a lot of ground in this discussion. And coming from my background, so I read a lot of Evo, and I have always arguments about religion as a whole, and then as of course the controversial aspects regarding Christianity. And I also have the Jungian side of things. Then we can discuss as well, since we're pretty much well versed. Every single one of us is very well versed in Jung, and if they aren't, they at least are aware of him. Um, so perhaps we could start off this discussion on how it even going for our sphere, of course, focusing on our sphere, but perhaps using the example of the European Union, on how religion can be a very controversial aspect in modern times. The European Union has this very difficult issue to resolve in the sense of how does it address religion, and how does it, and that same issue is present in our sphere if you really think about it, because we have the pagan side, and then the
Mm-hmm.
Protestants, and then the Catholics, and then the atheists that care about a lot of other things besides that. So going for the European Union example, I'm bringing it up because the European Union takes a backseat to the aspect and avoids it. We know that Europe, and even in the US, there's throughout history there's been this friction between Catholics and Protestants, and considering Europe also the Orthodox. So religious problems, and I know it's Easter right now as we're recording this, but religious problems have, or conflicts have been around for a long time, and to find it within our sphere, we shouldn't be worried about it. In my opinion, we should consider it an aspect of the times, where some people consider it very important, others don't, but everyone has an opinion on it, and everyone has their own belief that might align with the others, or be distinct from it. And going to that idea, I guess the European Union basically says that, well, religion is important and everyone should be allowed to practice it. And we know that in modern times that's very controversial when it comes to the
Yeah.
homogeneous nature of Europe. But in my perspective, and applying this notion to our sphere, I guess we can figure a middle ground by saying that yes, religion is important, but how important is it to the movement itself instead of to the individual? If we say that, well, religion is very important for me as a member of the descendant rights, That's fair, and you can have that opinion. But should the movement go past that or focus on religion itself? I guess from my perspective, the movement must go beyond religion, in the sense that it has more, our, perhaps important is not the right word to apply, but it has more pressing matters to address before we get into the idea of fixing the splitting views on religion inside our sphere. I think our sphere can manage the modern problems and pressing conflicts without having to address that problem just yet, but leaving it in the background, and perhaps on a later time we can begin to discuss it. So it's good that we're discussing it, of course. It makes for a fun discussion, but always with the base that there are urgent problems that need fixing, and perhaps discussing religion as a main point shouldn't really be that pressing of a matter. That's where I stand on it to start.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. I know, Weston, you probably want to jump in here. Yeah, I would say
Mhm.
that there are functionalist aspects of the faith which are probably, at least at this moment, more important than perhaps the faith itself. Now that may sound a bit like apathetic, but I think that, yeah, I would absolutely agree that a sort of a broader take on this whole debate is needed, and that quite necessary.
Yeah, there are a few things I want to touch on both of your points, and I agree fundamentally about some of the aspects of religion being something we need to strive to move beyond. I've always believed, on a personal respect, that the most important kind of fidelity between a people is the ethnic or national one rather than a religious one, and that is one of the factors we grapple with on the right, because we see a lot of people who bridge a sort of national unity based on religious identification, and that can be somewhat fallacious in any kind of nationalistic sense, because religious doctrine is not restricted, at least when we talk about things like Christianity. It is not restricted to a particular ethnos. But I wanted to say that I do agree anecdotally that I see a lot of people in this generation becoming more religious. There is a return to some sort of religious structure or religious community that the previous generations didn't see. If we compare, like, we go back to the millennial era, and I'm not a millennial, so I can only look retroactively. I'm Gen Z. I'm a Zoomer. Uh, and when I look at the millennial conception of religion, there's this idea that we need to rebel against our
Yeah,
predecessors.
yeah, very much so.
Religion is a conservative movement. These are conservative shackles that bind us to something supernatural and unrealistic. We live in a material world, and that materialism does not contribute to a religious point of view, which is metaphysical and strives to have a spirituality beyond the basic material impulses of being human. So, why is that resurgence occurring in younger generations? I think there are a lot of contributing factors, and maybe we can discuss some of them more in depth. But the main one, in my eyes, is that we have fewer communal ties in any other means. We live in a very atomized and isolated time period. So, religious community does provide that kind of structure. And that is something you do see in these sort of nascent religious communities, these modern Gen Z religious communities. This idea
Yeah,
that, yeah, that religion will provide some kind of new structure, that I can go to church and I can be among people who are implicitly going to become my friends or become people I can be social with.
yeah.
Whereas that kind of thing just hadn't existed in before the modern generation, or
Yeah,
I
there
should
were.
say, it did exist before millennials when religion was a consistent part of life. But there was
Yeah,
that brief period of time where religion was not, and then now it's returning. So there's a romanticized view of it.
Yeah, and
But
I think.
oh,
Oh,
sorry,
sorry. Go ahead.
I
Oh,
don't
no,
mean to
no,
interrupt you.
no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Another point I wanted to touch on is what is religion fundamentally? So there are a few different ways we can analyze religion. The first and perhaps most contentious way is with a Marxist analysis, and in the Marxist dogma, religion is, to put succinctly, the opiate of the masses. It is a tool by which the oppressors oppress, and it keeps people in line, namely the proletariat. And I've always found this definition, and I think I've written slightly on this matter, maybe in my old account before that one fell wayside. Uh, I believe I've written on why I dislike this, but to summarize, I don't see religion as being purely exploitative. There are numerous qualities in, if we just take Christianity, for example, that do not appeal to like an exploitative nature. It would be kind of counterintuitive for an exploiter to use Christianity because it appeals to certain higher principles that you wouldn't want to have in the ideal slave. And there's also an interpretation that you see in previous generations and sort of the skeptic community, as you might call it, that religion is just a means to escape the inevitability of death, that we want to believe in God and the afterlife because these things are helpful. They are coping mechanisms for the world to come, rather than the truth. And I say that with air quotes, the truth that when we die, there's nothing after that. Everyone we know and everyone we love is going nowhere in life, and they're just going to die. It's going to be infinite blackness. I also see this as somewhat contentious because not all religions do have a cohesive afterlife, and those that do don't necessarily have one that's something we want to strive towards. Maybe the mortality of things is something we humans fear, but I personally don't. If I died tomorrow, I'd be a little upset, but I think I'd make it through. But there's
Yeah,
more of a discussion to be had on that one.
yeah, yeah. I guess. Yeah. I mean, no more than any other man. I don't fear
Yeah,
death no more
it
than
doesn't keep me up
than
at
anyone
night.
else. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. As far
And those are
as
both. Sorry. One more thing I
no,
wanted to
no,
add
no,
to
no,
that
no. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
discussion. Those two are both outgroup analyses of religion. They come from communities that are not religious, looking at religion, namely as a functional paradigm, as a tool in some way, either to oppress or to cope. Um, and if we look at it from an in-group perspective, if I were religious, what does religion mean to me? It means something metaphysical. It means that the world is not so simply a behaviorist paradigm. I don't simply exist to delve between different kinds of stimuli and react to them. I exist for a higher purpose. I was designed, and I manifest on this earth with an objective, some kind of purposeful existence. And I think that's one of the most important facets to understand the revival, because in a world where we arguably have lost a lot of communal and national connections, we're not taught that it's okay to be a part of a racial or cultural community. Religion can supplant that and say, well, you may not have a meaningful existence because you're part of a group of people, on material or physical characteristics or historical characteristics, but you can have a meaningful existence because you're granted one by divine power. And maybe that's still slightly a functionalist perspective, but I think it gives more credence to the idea that religion is a positive thing, and that you want to have a society which is in some way religious, because the metaphysical reality is as equally important as the physical one for having a healthy and structured existence.
Yeah. I would absolutely agree with that, and I would also say is in regards to the kind of revival that we're seeing of young men and perhaps some young women who are joining the kind of traditional Christian institutions. Like for example, I was just talking earlier today on Twitter X whatever. To someone that I have noticed like an increasing number of guys over the past few years that I've either talked to and a couple of them whom I've met that have converted to Orthodoxy, and these guys were all Southerners, and I found that kind of interesting because the two don't seem like the Southern kind of the American of the Southland is kind of you'd imagine them to be kind of a Presbyterian or a Baptist or a member of one of these kind of low church or kind of Protestant denominations. And I think because of the nature of liberalism and just the current zeitgeist, which is dying. I mean, we are seeing a transition to another zeitgeist. We're in the middle of that shift right now, where the old is kind of being ushered out and the new is arriving. I think that it's the one sort of aspect that you are allowed to still be a part of, that gives people, that binds you by community, by sort of something greater than oneself. I think that on a functional aspect there is that facet that's happening. And I think maybe that would explain why we're seeing maybe. And I don't think it's a huge number of people that are, there's not like a mass conversion going on, but there is a sizable number of, like, especially young men. The article that I was reading, it happened to be particularly about young men, and it just focused, I believe, on France and in Spain. And I'm sure that there's probably a great deal of overlap with people who are sympathetic with our views. But as a matter of, like I said earlier about the faith in previous eras or epochs being kind of a defense mechanism that united Europe in times of crisis, kind of prior to modernity. I think that it's broken down, and because you can't really unite around ethnos or things like race. You do see, I think there is some truth that you do see people kind of turning to the church because it is sort of the one sort of allowable institution or community that you can be a part of, that is that brings collectivism, that brings something again, something greater than oneself. But I'll pass it over to Rain.
Yeah, both of you have raised great points, and of course, the pressing matter right now is why are young people joining religious circles, and especially Christianity in European countries, in America. And I might get let me just start off this argument by saying that I'm not a Baptist or a Nietzschean, but the question we must raise is if the fact that young people are joining the religion again, if they're joining Christianity, Catholicism, or Protestant denominations, the question is the following: are they joining it, and is it productive? Is it productive in the sense of bringing change to this system, or are they joining it, and is it pacifying the pressing concerns? Uh, of course, if you're going to go for the Marxist interpretation, or even to a certain level the Nietzschean interpretation, especially in Baptist circles right now, is that religion, collective religion, is a pacifying mechanism that binds young men to this worship of a figure and makes them stop their cause. But they say that about family, or about getting a girlfriend as well, and they aren't the only
Yeah.
ones. The
Yeah.
Baptists aren't
They
the
say
only
that
ones that
about
say
every.
that about
They
that.
say that about
Any
everything.
kind of anything that would constrain the revolution is a distraction. If you're not picking up a gun and
Yeah.
doing
So
something Fed posting,
Right.
then
Right.
yeah. So that's where I want to start this. And if we're gonna, if as I said, I come with the certain Jungian background, and a focus of it is on this the symbol or on the archetype. And I have a Catholic background. I'm Catholic, and Catholicism has this focus on a progressive adaptation of religion to the context it's in. That's why we have the papal encyclicas. I believe that's how you say it in English. It is this development of or an adaptation of saying that, yeah, we're gonna adapt to the pressing concerns. And well, of course, that in modern times that's taking a progressive stance to the issue, but it's not always like that. And there's a when I raise the concern of pacification, it's also to bring attention to this, is that, well, some people are critics of Catholicism or of Christianity as a whole, but I'm tired with the Catholicism because I know Christian denominations are different. If we're talking about orthodoxy, we will have to have a different approach, of course, to this progressive adaptation. But in the Catholic perspective, this adaptation to the concerns of the context it's in, it's good in the sense that if young people are joining right now, and I don't mean to say this to somehow, once I brought up this argument in a certain context, and I received back, well, you're trying to make you're not trying to turn you're not trying to bring man closer to God, you're trying to bring God closer to man, as a criticism of this idea. And I guess that's fair, but my point, and I'm bringing it up for discussion, and I would like to hear your opinions about it, is if young people are joining the church, if young people are joining religious groups, uh, uh, they should also not take the pacification that, of course, comes with joining a collective, because it's undeniable that there's a certain pacification of belonging. You lean back, you feel safer, but that shouldn't be enough to stop you from having these pressing concerns. It should motivate you to take the community and declare your points and to change it or to influence it, to say that, well, I'm joining this community, I can finally have a sense of belonging in modern times where there's this pressing concern that is isolation among the young people, especially among men. And our generation, I believe, I'm Gen Z as well. And if people are joining a religion, if young people are joining a religion, I think that that's a pressing concern that must be addressed, is that, are they joining it, and are they pushing to change the status quo that it's corrosive to a certain sense of identity beyond the group, of beyond the religious group, that says that, because if we're talking about religion, of course there's an objective sense to it that goes beyond the liberal abstraction. It's more objective than liberalism, or more objective than ideology, than political ideology.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
there's a sense of abstraction, because the objective truths that it proclaims are much more abstract than the material that you can see and touch and feel and connect to. And if if we're trying to base a movement, if we're trying to base a group, we gotta at least present that material aspect with pressing concern beyond the, and that's something that uh, religion struggles with to a certain degree. Of course, in Catholicism we have the ritual of the Eucharist, and in Protestants too, but there's a different perspective of it, and that's
Yeah.
why I bring up Jung,
There's less of
because
an
Jung's,
emphasis.
yeah, of course, there's a less of an emphasis depending on the denomination. Some even say that there's no need to even do it, while others say that it's just a symbol. And Catholicism, of course, says it's the body of blood and of Christ in a literal sense. So I'm bringing up Jung in this case because Jung talks about how the ritual connected to Christianity are outdated, and that's why he brought up this psychoanalysis. And Sigmund Freud, brought up the psychoanalysis to completely push away religion. Jung's main criticism of Freud is this one. He wants to push away religion, and instead of pushing away religion to follow the truth of the matter that religion forgot about, that's Jung's critique. He wants to completely change it and to be completely focused on the sexual nature of ambition, or the, in on the libido, on the libido as the
Yeah.
motor and objective truth of human experience. And Jung says no. If we think religion is outdated, we're gonna push it back and we're gonna focus on finding what's objective about it, what's the objective point of truth, and we're not gonna be too focused on the libido. We're gonna go for the full experience. All of this to say that Jung saw religion as outdated and was bringing up this to the modern times. There was this need of adaptation to a certain new context. And to Jung's credit, I believe at the time it's a pressing concern. Of course, it's always a pressing concern. Is it up to date to the concerns of the present? And of course, you have then Joseph Campbell that also analyzes the idea of the symbol of the Eucharist, of the symbol, and I'm referring to the Eucharist as the main focus of this argument. So if if we're talking about how the symbol, so we're talking about how the Eucharist transmits this truth that's more abstract than it should be. We're also going to talk about how the ritual is important to the context. And in Catholicism, there's this, as I've said before, there's this adaptability to the concerns of the present.
Yeah.
While in Protestantism and Orthodoxy, it's different. And just to finish up, I'm going to bring up Evola, because Evola has a great quote that I've read. I can't point the exact quote and I can't point the exact book, so you can flame me for it. And but it stuck with me, or the interpretation I got from it, which was something along the lines of: if you're in a desert and you find a map that is torn, you have difficulty just analyzing the map itself. It's torn, it's unreadable. So it means tradition when he refers to this map.
Right.
While if you're in the desert and you have the choice between following that ruined map or following a group that is going somewhere, it's better to follow that group, because at least it's going somewhere instead of you trying to lose yourself in that map. So my main point of all of this huge talk, is just to say that I guess it's positive that young people are finding religion again. As a Catholic, I'm happy that young people are finding religion again. And personally, I found, I since I've gotten older, I'm not that old, but since I've gotten older, I've found myself connecting with religion in a aspect beyond the utilitarian, or beyond the idea of the collective as a need. So I'm glad that young people are finding this collective aspect of it. But is it enough, or is it pacifying them? So I'll leave that question up to you guys, and I've already said my piece on it.
I mean, I believe that's a very valid point to bring up. Is religion, by necessity, a pacifying force? It could be argued that any sort of communal structure does pacify, in the sense that it reduces the individual's motivation to strive for something in his own personage and in his own sort of agency, because he sublimates some of his individual agency to appeal to the collective. So in that sense, there is a real part of religion that infringes upon that kind of individualism. But in the sense whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, that's where it becomes more debatable. I think that we all, in participating in society, surrender ourselves to something greater. It's just part of the way life works. And whereas in the modern context, we might surrender ourselves to some kind of more hedonistic or degenerate mode of living, religion might provide something more conducive to the society we want to exist within, at least on the right.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And as far as the question of whether it's a positive or negative aspect, I would say that it's a positive aspect, because it is creating at least a semblance of collective communal structures, and then hopefully, whether or not someone joins, becomes part of the faith. Let's say they convert to the Roman Church, to Catholicism. and they're doing that purely for like utilitarian or functionalist purposes. Well, from there, they might actually end up with the kind of deeper meaning of what the faith is supposed to be about, right? And like,
Hmm.
for example, when you take communion, you're communing with God and everyone else within your parish, right? So hopefully they may be joining because they are seeking they're seeking community, they're seeking collective cohesion and all the rest of that, but hopefully that it will lead them to something greater than themselves, and sort of the deeper meaning within that people have always found within the faith. And I would say as far as Jung goes, I think that you were spot on as far as his criticism of Freud, where Freud tried to much like Marx, tried to kind of boil everything down into these very, not that the psyche particularly like libido,
Hmm.
or the superego, or the id rather, is not, I mean, that's not like purely material, but it is sort of kind of a bastardization of Jung's interpretation of the psyche and what faith means to the individual psyche of every man. So as far as the question of if it's good and as a pacifier, like you do need some sort of pacifying aspect in all, because that's what gives a society order. So I mean, during like a period of interregnum such as our own, like yeah, we don't necessarily want people pacifying, but again, I do kind of return to the aspect of like the whether it's functional. I think functionally it is a positive thing to see because it is going in the direction that we desperately need. We desperately need people to kind of find community cohesion, which could lead to, as we all want, sort of ethnic or racial cohesion, which is sort of the primary goal here in this sphere. At least I would hope.
Yeah, I want to touch upon one last point that I forgot to add, because I've I've criticized this certain modern proclivity towards the ancient regime. You'll see it in France with people walking around with the paintings of Louis XVI, or even in
Yeah.
Portugal, where's this certain nostalgia for not the monarchy in the absolute sense, but the constitutional monarchy. And you'll see that every nationalist pretty much hates the constitutional monarchy in Portugal because it was a time of subservience to other of ruling and subservience to international interests. And but you won't see it in Spain because Spain has the constitutional monarchy right now, and they consider the king a treasonous figure. And you won't see it in the United Kingdom. There's these the nationalists are also much more vicious towards the monarchy.
Do they have
And
a
I bring
king
this up.
in Great Britain? No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, Ray. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, and uh, so I bring this up because I've criticized this aspect of this nostalgia for the monarchy. You even see it in White Germany, and because it's pacifying, and I criticize it as pacifying because it's uniting us. It's the criticism that I brought up in a previous discussion where it's like the revolution has succeeded when you're fighting for the ambitions of the revolution itself. I brought this up in the argument for the French Revolution, where we saw that the revolutionaries it was an absolute monarchy pretty much, and then the revolutionaries bring upon the constitutional monarchy, and then the Jacobins bring upon the terror, and the moment that the terror is brought upon, the people, the opposition to the Jacobins, are not fighting for the absolute monarchy as much as they're fighting for the constitutional monarchy.
Yeah, that's an
And,
excellent point.
and thank you. I know someone will disagree with that because I have a mutual or two that disagrees with that, but it's fine. And just to continue, it's I bring this up because it's pacifying. If we try to apply this same context to religion, if we go for religion as it is, and I mean that in almost this if we accept the religious procedures of for example Catholicism as it is, it's pacifying as well. And I'm much more lenient on religion, first off because I'm religious and I believe in certain absolute truths, of course, as a
Hmm.
Catholic. And I love the Catholic Church and the architecture and the truth and the myth or the objective truth of the story of Christ, of course. But if we accept the modern state of Catholicism, and if we fight for that, we're doing exactly what the opposition was doing during the Jacobin terror, which is you're not fighting for what was, you're fighting for what they want you to fight for. So you're fighting a losing battle already when you're accepting this conservative force. You're being a conservative, you're not being a dissident. And conservatism, well, as we've seen it, it's failing. It's changing. It would be difficult to call, for example, modern American politics as they are conservative. It would be difficult to call modern European politics with the populist parties as conservative. They call themselves conservative, but they're populist first, of course, and they reject this idea of conserving. They preach it, but they push it away behind others' back for liberalism, of course. But if we accept religion as is, we're also being we will be even uh, more oblivious to the nature of politics than the populists, for example, because we're fighting for something that's already corrupted, and that would be something everyone would
Hmm.
say, I believe.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'll leave it there, and I'll let you guys go bite into that.
Oh, did you wanna have a take on that, whistling, or you want me to go?
Yeah, I mean, in general, the ancient regime mentality that you see, monarchists and whatnot, who appeal to sort of a romanticized view of the past, that's not uncommon even in places without a monarchy. We see that in America. We have a lot of people who call themselves constitutionalists and whatnot, who believe the ideal American society should be structured around the specific ideals of the founding fathers. And their ideas about what the founding fathers believed is not always necessarily correct. That's why I use the term romanticized,
Yeah.
and that's what I see in the same vein as people who talk about constitutional monarchies and try to appeal to the worldview, the pre-revolutionary worldview, the pre-French Revolutionary worldview. In specific, the monarchical, feudal aspects, and the way religion structured society at the time. They're definitely romanticizing a world that doesn't that didn't ever really exist in the concrete way they believe it did. And Rain here says he doesn't want to make enemies, but I feel that statement might bring up some contentious people here. Even
Probably,
then, but
probably.
it is something I do believe, and it is something I see
Yeah.
evidence to support. Uh, as for the other discussion about religion and its place as again a pacifying agent, uh, and whether or not, as a religious person, and I have to confess that I'm not a particularly religious person. I'm not. I've never been. I was never raised in a religious context, even though I do come from, I guess, a mixed Protestant Catholic
Yeah.
family here.
Yeah, so same with me. I no, not Catholic, but two different Protestant, Episcopal and Lutheran. I was baptized Lutheran. But anyways,
Hmm.
pardon me.
No, it's all right, and that's not to say there aren't religious people in my family. It's sort of bounced back and forth throughout my life, but I myself, again, was not really raised in a religious context. So I find it interesting that Rain here, who says who claims to be religious is also looking at religion in a far more functionalist point of view than I think either Nick or I have expressed here. And when I say that's interesting, I mean to say, does that seem counter? Does that seem counter to what religion is for you? Like when you think of yourself in a personal religious context, is and you say that it is good that people are becoming more religious, but at the same time there's a pacifying element. How do you contend those two factors with each other?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, yeah. I was just curious more than anything.
Yeah, so that's why I brought up the Catholic notion of I'm not a religious scholar, of course, and I'm sure there's like 10 or 20 mutuals that will curse me for this and will give me like 10 different arguments presented by the different popes throughout these 2000 years that will deny these ideas. But uh, um, from from what I've studied, it's Catholicism has this idea, or the main difference that strikes at the core, and that's why there's this modern friction with orthodoxy, and that's why some people in the West pick orthodoxy as the go-to religion, which is the idea of tradition. And we know that, yeah, we love tradition, of course we love tradition, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And especially if you're an Evolian, or if you've read Evo like I did, you
Right.
would go you would say that tradition is the most important thing in the world, everybody should follow tradition. Well, tradition has different interpretations, and of course I follow the Evolian tradition, the Evolian notion of tradition, which is there's an absolute truth and core values that have existed, that are fundamental to the existence. And it's not uh, for Orthodox, for in Orthodoxy, if you're talking about tradition, is like, well, tradition is all of that, and how we paint our icons. And it's like, okay, yeah, I like Orthodox icons. I visited, I live, I study in Poland, and I live in Poland for the most part of this last year, and I've went to many Orthodox churches, of old Orthodox churches, and I've seen a lot of Orthodox icons, and they're amazing, they're beautiful, of course, but there's this intransigent aspect that's counterproductive to adapting, and there's virtue in that, of course. Taking the
I would say that that's a
I'm gonna sound like
good
Jordan
point.
Peterson to yeah, yeah,
Oh,
I'm gonna
sorry.
sound
Go
a bit
ahead. Do
like
you wanna?
Jordan Peterson here, and yeah, I just wanted to finish up.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
Go ahead. Go ahead.
so Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to sound a bit like Jordan Peterson here and try to play both sides without giving an answer, which is, of
Mm-hmm.
course, of course, tradition in the Orthodox sense is beautiful in itself, and there's virtue in that. But there's also this deniability to adapt to there's this intransigent aspect to it that refuses to adapt. And when I picture Orthodox religion, Orthodox Christianity, I always picture, how the icons and the murals in the Orthodox churches, on the older ones, where these ancient Orthodox churches, they're faded. I believe that's what happens when you refuse to adapt to the context. You start to fade away, you start to lose your essence and your beauty, and your murals wash away, and you get these beautiful ruins, and you become, of course, the Evolus man among the ruins. You
Yeah.
walk around, and everything is faded, and there's beauty in that, there's beauty in the core, of course, but it's a ruin, and there's not much to it besides being a ruin and being beautiful, while going for the Catholic doctrine. And I'm gonna make some enemies out of these arguments, I know. I shouldn't have said that, I didn't want to make enemies, but oh well, because I probably already made a ton.
There's no discussion about religion that won't leave somebody unhappy.
Right. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah,
It's an impossible factor to overcome when you're talking. That's
it's
why.
quite the
Yeah.
task.
Yeah.
And just to finish, that's why to answer whistling, that's why as a Catholic, I see, of course, I argue, or I point to the fact that the collective brings upon a certain level of pacification, and particularly in modern religion, there's a particular pacifying aspect in Catholicism, for example, where it says that forgive your neighbor, and this is weaponized. I want to talk about that later. This is weaponized by malicious actors to say that forgive your neighbor. Yeah, they killed your son, but forgive him.
Yeah.
Well, how
Yeah.
do you forgive them? You can forgive them in many ways, but the way they want you to forgive them is to do nothing about it, and is to say that, yeah, fine, sorry for you having killed my son and for me getting mad about it, and sorry for the people around me getting mad about it, and sorry for being an awful person and for my son having. Okay, let's stop it there before I get
Yeah.
too graphic for you too.
No, but
But
No,
I understand what you
Mhm.
mean. I'll
yeah,
throw this in before I toss it back. The one aspect too, yeah, it gets absolutely weaponized. But it also, I was talking with a mutual the other day, and Finnegan, shout out to Finnegan. We were talking about the idea of like what is the neighbor, right? So like, okay, yes, love thy neighbor as thyself. What defines a neighbor, first of all, right? And the neighbor cannot be it cannot be universal. So I think sometimes that there's this aspect of Christianity from people outside the faith, and of course I have my own criticisms of it. Although I do consider myself a Christian. However, yeah, that it gets weaponized by, oh well, you have to turn the other cheek even in the face of violence and all sorts of abhorrent acts. But I think what you're describing with the point you made earlier about the French Revolution, it's sort of a dialectical process, right? That with you saw with the Jacobins, and then the end result, right? I guess you could say the kind of reductive version of this would be the synthesis was Napoleon kind of the return of a legitimate authority, at least for a time in France. Yeah, that I'll just throw that out there. And one more thing about orthodoxy, I think, and I do, of course, the face traditionally in Europe, the Roman Church and the various Orthodox churches. I would say the one thing that they have, and at one time I think the Anglicans did have this, is you were talking about the idea of adapting, and I would say that as far as Orthodox Christians, I like the fact that they do have sort of they've tied their faith with the ethnos, with the idea of the nation. And I know that we've talked about this on previous spaces, but that's why I do sort of admire that aspect, and and perhaps with a lot of American Southerners, they see that as it's not like this kind of low church sort of corny Protestantism, which no offense intended to anyone who subscribes or comes from that confessional heritage, but it is sort of it's unique to the people or the ethnos. Like you have the Greek Orthodox Church, you have the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, you have the Russian Orthodox Church. So it's unique to their historical and cultural particularities, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I would say that's a big part of it. But there's something else I want to touch on about orthodoxy, and like it's kind of mystical. And, and what I mean
Yeah,
by that
yeah,
is that okay, let's compare it to the cultural ideas that surround Catholicism and Protestantism in America, at least. I can't speak for Europe, so I won't. I'll let Rain do that, given when he speaks. But in America, what is Protestantism? And we talk about the church, I guess, being used as a tool to
hmm
turn the other cheek or to liberalize society. And I think there's something to be said about an inherently liberal nature to an orthodox reading of Christian doctrine. And yeah, people are going to hate me for that. So I'll elaborate more and make them hate me more later. But in Protestantism, the image that comes to mind as an American are these kinds of mega churches with
yeah,
more puritanical social views, but also kind of a flamboyant display of the faith that's very out of touch with what I would want to see in a spiritual context, a spiritual religion. It's it's very theatrical, I guess. And Catholicism, likewise, suffers from a similar situation. It's associated with a lower class, kind of vulgar, a vulgar population. A lot of that's due to the religious nature of our migrant problem. They're generally Catholics because they come
Hmm.
from Latin America, so we tend to associate the more orthodox belief or more orthodox holdings of the Catholic faith with undesirable people in American society. But when it comes to orthodoxy, it still feels, and I say this as somebody who is not Orthodox, but obviously circles around Orthodox circles, at least on Twitter. It feels mystical. It has this element of exoticism that makes you think this religion has something missing for me. This religion can provide me with that spiritual feeling that Protestantism and Catholicism cannot. And maybe we can say that there's a little bit of Orientalism in that view because it is a
Yeah,
more Oriental religion.
you do see
But
that with people like converting to Buddhism and stuff.
yeah, and I was about to say that because we were talking about Jung earlier, and Jung talks about actually the religious conversions of his time and why people because at that time people were converting or at least entertaining Eastern religion, like Buddhism or Taoism. Taoism was a big thing at that time, perhaps greater than Buddhism. But
Even Evola dabbled in it a bit.
yeah, and Jung states that the appeal is because as time went on, the symbols that we associated with Christianity became less obfuscate, and when somebody wanted to believe, when someone wanted to believe in the Christian iconography, they would have these monumental images, these great deified ideas about angels and heaven and God and the nature of this divine force that was so overwhelmingly powerful and like a great ocean, like a great wave, a flood that would take over the entire world, that would take over the entirety of existence. It was mythical, it was mystical, uh,
Yeah,
and
and
you don't see
completely
that anymore.
totalizing.
Yeah, totalizing. That's a good word. I should have used that. It was a totalizing experience that when these symbols, when the cross itself became something more well understood, when people began to look into the doctrine, everybody became an armchair theologian. It lost that totality. It lost that mysticism. And so in the East, there's these religions, Buddhism and Taoism, that to Westerners looked fairly mystical. We had these symbols that were completely illegible. If you look at like the Buddhist diagram of hell, I don't even know what it's called. It's just it's completely it's completely foreign. It's completely alien. I don't know how to read this. I don't know how to read these different levels of these creatures being displayed
Hmm.
here, all these colors and symbolism. It looks cool, to put it
Yeah,
briefly. It looks interesting, and it looks
yeah,
like it can tell me something deeper about the world, and that's due to the mystical nature of the artwork and the symbols. And that's partly because I don't understand them. I don't know what it means.
yeah.
If I could delve into each symbol and delve into each theme of Buddhism, it probably wouldn't feel as exotic to me. And so
So
Eastern Orthodoxy is a Christian doctrine. It's a Christian sect that can appeal to kind of that kind of desire.
those are really good points, and I won't deny the mystical aspect of Orthodoxy. It's I believe they call it the mysteries. There's this this value they put in the mysteries of the faith that isn't as apparent in Catholicism or in Protestantism even, because Catholicism has this scientific approach to it, and we know that the Catholic Church financed the scientific revolution. But let's touch upon the Buddhist aspect, because I want to grab that and I want to delve into another interesting topic, which is Evola talked about how yoga is much more than just going to the gym and putting down a mat and doing the
Yeah,
stretches.
yeah.
Well,
So
hang on.
even
Let's
if
clarify. That's not Buddhism. That's
Oh,
Hinduism.
that's Hindu. Yeah, that's
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, of course.
I
But
get your point.
he was a bit of a Hindu
Yeah,
uh, extravagant, I guess. I don't know how to
yeah, he
call it.
fancied himself as kind of an
He used those
Orientalist
terms
somewhat.
Yeah, an
rather
Orientalist.
liberally.
Yeah. So maybe I should have said Oriental religion instead of targeting Buddhism. You guys are right, of course.
Yeah,
But
we know
my
what you
main
mean.
point,
Yeah, it's all
yeah, my
good.
main point here is going back to the idea of the weaponization of religion, or the weaponization, or the subversion, because Evola pointed to yoga as saying that, well, this is not just stretching. If you're just stretching, it's just stretch, don't call it yoga. And well, there's much more to yoga than that, and some people call it satanic or whatever. But we can then point to something Ever wrote, which is a book on theosophy. Just kidding. Just kidding. It's the Spiritism in the modern age, which is where he talks about theosophy, and he says that these modern religions are weaponized liberalism to corrupt the spiritual identity of the world, but of the West. They're distilled liberalism in the religious form. And what it means by that is, well, they call themselves religion, but they're not a religion. They're an ideology, because they base themselves on a certain moral that is extracted from liberalism. They're feel good religions, or they're pacifying aspects, or they're the constitutional monarchy of the religious world, because they're a corruption, but you want to fight for that corruption because it's the only thing you know, and your enemies are pushing past that. And just to point out that when I this is what I mean by weaponization of religion as a when religion is weaponized in this way, I don't consider it a religion. Or when Christianity itself is weaponized, it's not a then when it's weaponized by mostly atheists or agnostics, it's not a religion they're talking about. It's not Christianity that they're talking about. They're using a weapon. They're using an ideology, a political weapon to pacify their enemies. And this is what I mean by the pacification through religion. It's not an argument against religion itself. It's an argument about how people use religion in the modern way. Evola talked about it in once again in Spiritism in the Modern Way. I believe that's the name of the book. Fact check me. I haven't read it in a bit, and the name is really wrong. Like always books, it's like the most interesting name, the most interesting title, but always really wrong or really esoteric.
Right.
Mhm.
In typical Evolian fashion.
Yeah, yeah. It makes it really interesting. You can't resist picking a book that's called Revolt Against the Modern World. But
Ride the tiger.
Mm.
you
The
ride the
path of
tiger,
the
man
I
among
just
the
want to
cinnabar.
know what it's
ruins.
about. What am I
Yeah.
revolting
Yeah, of
against? What's
course.
wrong with the modern world?
Yeah, of
Right,
course.
right.
I have a
Yeah,
few
the
So
path.
ideas, but
Yeah.
and even Evola's main problem wasn't with Christianity itself. In that book, he says that he believes there's a certain and this is what I mean. This is my main point. He believes that there's a certain a group or within the church, within Christianity, that's trying to bring this crusader Christianity back. They're trying to push this vitalistic version of religion that is here to stay and will force itself and will adapt to the context, of course, but with these fundamental truths, with tradition in the Evolian sense. And he believes that. And he says that if Christianity can do that, you'll support Christianity. And he ends up saying that, well, I'm pessimistic about it. A lot of these Christians are libtards, am I right? But
mm.
but he
Yeah.
gives that sense, and that's Evo, and Evo is one hell of a critic of Christianity, and even he gives that leniency And nobody reads that book from Evo. Nobody reads Spiritism in the modern age. Who cares about that? Esoteric stuff? What? No, no way. I want to read Man Among Ruins. That's
Right.
cool.
The
Why
big
am I among
three.
the ruins?
Fascism viewed
And
from the right.
yeah, fascism from the right, and and uh, and the revolt against the modern world, right? The tiger. Those are the
Right.
big ones everybody wants to read. But in this book, it says that, and nobody reads it, so everybody thinks that Evo is an hater, and if you're an Evoian, you want to burn down churches and ride the tiger, which doesn't mean riding the tiger doesn't mean anything like that. There's a
Right.
it's a metaphor or a symbol, but
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
um and that's what I mean by the commodification, the classification, and the weaponization of religion. It's a corrosive and subversive version of religion that I don't follow. And when I bringing up back Catholicism and to finish answering Whistling, because I believe I left that answer in half. Uh, that's the main point I want to contextualize about Catholicism, which is the adaptation to the context. Most people right now view it as bad. Catholicism shouldn't adapt to the context. It should force itself upon the context of orthodoxy. It should remain this mystical faith, and it should have these core values. And my approach to it, and I believe that's the Catholic approach, even if it's corrupted in modern times to this pacifying, love your neighbor in the subversive sense of the neighbor. I believe Nick explained it really well how the neighbor should be viewed, but isn't right now, of what the neighbor means. But I believe Catholicism is right in the sense that you have to have the tradition. You have to have the tradition in the evolution sense. You have to have the objective and fundamental truths, but you also have to be able to adapt to the context. You also have to be able to influence and to be influenced by, because you have to be able to. Right now, if Catholicism is not going to be influenced by the youth joining it, it's gonna crush. It's gonna die. Oh, let me pull back. It's not gonna die, of course. It's gonna refuse to adapt, and it's gonna lose members. That's why it
Yeah.
must force it must be able to adapt. Right now, we want it to adapt. If you're a Catholic and you're hopeful from the dissident right, if you're a Catholic, you want Catholicism to adapt. You want it to adapt to what it needs to be to cure our problems right now. And that part is refusing to adapt. So that's interesting, because you criticize Catholicism and say that, well, it shouldn't try to adapt. But right now, if you're a dissident, you actually should want Catholicism to adapt and to change how it works to something that can fix our problems, and something that can push us past our modern condition. So that's where I stand on it, and that's how I answer your question, which is, um, uh, which was what, how do I view why how am I a Catholic, and am I able to understand that there's this pacifying aspect, because the pacifying aspect is 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 natural to collectives, but it's also used in a very subversive and corrosive way. And I believe that's the main weapon, or the main form of weaponization of religion right now. And we need to be aware of it. We can't reject it to be able to fight it and to change it. So of course I'm a Catholic, but I can see the errors of modern Catholicism, or modern organized religion as a whole. And I believe that's Jung's approach to the subject, bringing back to Jung, because Jung, when Jung was asked, it's the famous interview on YouTube, everybody quotes it. When Jung was asked, um, "Do you think there's a God?" and Jung says, "I don't think. I know there's a God." And
Right.
that's the point. That's the point. It's and I know there's the truth in that. I know there's a lot of truth in Catholicism, but of course there's flaws that must be fixed. And if I'm not able to recognize those flaws, I'm not going to be able to fix it. And worst case scenario, I'm not even going to be able to have a path or fix the map. When I brought up Evo with the map in the desert, I'm not going to be able to fix the map and to find the objective truth that I'm looking for, that the main point of the religion proclaims, and I can't even reach it through that religion, because it's so because the symbol is so disconnected from it. So that's where I stand on that issue.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty astute answer and observations about the kind of state of the church, because I think that you'd have to be sort of willfully blind to not see that I mean, there obviously has been a subversion from inside of the church. I mean, I think that's sort of indisputable, and at the same time, we do have to be men among like we have to be men of our age, right? Like the reason why when we talk about like LARPing a lot in this sphere, and I actually am like kind of pro LARPing as long as it's doesn't we don't go too overboard with it, but LARPing in a different sense, like pretending that we are still. Wilson mentioned a while back that like it would be like really, really cool to like walk around with a saber, or something, or a sword, right? If it didn't, but of course, that would be kind of a little larpy, a little cringy. So we do have to be kind of, and I mean, it would be badass, but at the same time, like it would look a little out of place. So we do have to kind of adapt at times, to a certain extent, while holding on to those eternal truths, right? The absolute truth and the kind of higher planes that we get, with the faith. But yeah, I wanted to bring up a topic here, about the Kulturkampf, the Kulturkampf in Germany, where there was, and this is not the only instance, I guess. You saw this with the unification of Italy, right, in the 19th century, where you had, Catholics fighting Catholics a lot of the time, and the Papal States, and the nationalists, I guess, right? So there's always been this sort of this dilemma between like the church and state in America. I think has kind of, as we see today, and again, Winston brought this up earlier. It's sort of failed, right? Where you see these mega churches, and right, there's no liturgy, there's no Eucharist. And a lot of times there isn't even a crucifix anywhere in sight on the stage. There's no priest. I mean, it's nothing, right?
I would expect it'd be more likely to see an Israeli flag in the modern Protestant church
Right,
than a
right. I mean, no,
crucifix.
yeah, that's very true. I'm sure. I mean, I guarantee you, you could go to one of those on any given Sunday, and you would see a giant Israeli flag on the stage or something. If especially after some event, right? Like I don't know, just October 7th or something. Just throwing one of these events out there like that, right? So. Yeah, so I mean, the American founders kind of, you're talking about this idea of a romanticized era earlier, and this is a little, I'm going to diverge a little bit from it, but I think that the separation of church and state, first of all, isn't doable because we see the fruits of it today. The fruits of it are like mega churches and like schisms within schisms within schisms, and you have all these denominations. Most of them would never have even been recognized as Christian, any semblance of Christianity. And I think perhaps maybe again, like as you brought up earlier, people looking to orthodoxy and the kind of mysticism. And I do realize in Catholicism there is a like a mystical. There was a sort of mysticism just before the scholastics really, like people like Aquinas took over. I think Heidegger did his thesis on his doctoral thesis on something of a gentleman who was I think he was a monk, but he was kind of represented that Christian mystic spirit. Um, and as far as it's like the orthodoxy thing, the I just completely lost my train of thought. But anyways, yeah, back to as far as like the church and state. Um, Under the Kulturkampf, right, in Germany, you did have this kind of, and then in Italy, you did have this battle between church and state, and so my question, I guess, would be how do we square the circle with the Vatican being sort of the dominion of Europe, or in like America, right? For those who are confessed Catholics and are parts of the church, while retaining the sort of sovereignty. Because we last time we talked about sort of a united Europe and the sort of inherent problems there, and also the inherent benefits that could be relied on. But at the end of the day, as sort of as fascists, I guess you could say, like the state sort of needs to have the final say over matters of civil society, and matters of governance. So my question kind of just would be how to square the circle. And we saw that like Bismarck had to kind of fight the Catholic Church, even though a large portion of Germans were Catholic. I mean, it was sort of split between Catholics and Protestants. And so I guess I understand the reason why that had to take place. And I would say, like, where would we go from here to kind of square that circle?
Yeah, well, I guess to begin with, I'm a very strong believer that church and state should not be separated for the exact reasons the
Right.
founding fathers believed it should be. In American society, among particularly religious people, there's this pervasive belief that the founding fathers, oh, actually, I shouldn't even say among religious people, among Americans in general, that the founding fathers wanted to separate the state
Yeah.
and religion to protect the state from being dominated by religious people. And that, according to the actual words of the founding fathers, is not correct. They wanted to separate it because they believed the state would inevitably influence religion to the detriment of religious orthodoxy. And I think they should be unified because I see religion in the ideal state as being a subject of the state rather than its own independent entity. So
Yeah.
that's generally where I stand on that issue, and I know at least in personal correspondence we've discussed that before, and I've probably said it in a space otherwise, but
Yeah.
we should strive, and that whole culture conf idea, we should strive for a state with a primary religion. I think it's important that the state um, has, that the state controls or governs from both, the physical domain and the metaphysical domain. We should have an ideology because religion is ultimately ideological. There's a spiritual aspect to it, but the doctrinal side does manifest as ideology, and the state doesn't need competing ideologies. The state should make sure that whatever religious doctrines are available for the people to publicly hold as their faith are constrained by those which are ameliorative towards the objectives of the state and therefore the objectives of the nation. I think that should be a rational view of any fascist. And of course, when we take a look at Nazi Germany and their ideas about positive Christianity, there's a similar sentiment there with Hitler. And I know that the table talks and whatnot, a lot of people see those as somewhat debatable in authenticity, but I do lean towards them being fairly authentic, and I
I,
think that
I think they are as well.
I think that Hitler's view on Christianity would have been to integrate it into the Nazi state and change it so that it was so that the liberal elements were expelled from it. And we talked a little earlier about the malleability of religion with the example of loving thy neighbor, and how in the modern liberal context that's been interpreted as anybody, any foreigner is your neighbor, and that's of course not a nationalistic philosophy. And you could argue, if you look at the biblical scripture entirely on its own merit, that that is the goal there. We're all, there's no Greek or Jew or whatever. I don't know the exact line, so I'm paraphrasing. And you should love thy neighbor. And if we are going to reinterpret Christianity for a nationalist context, we have to do away with those global egalitarian views.
Yeah, that kind of
So,
universalism of
mhm.
it is but again, like we were talking about earlier. Yeah, it's been weaponized for sure.
Yeah. And another example that I see commonly, that circles around nationalist circles, is that, um, just just I've lost it right out of my mind. It was there. Oh,
Yeah,
to honor
for
thy
me.
mother, honor thy father. That, as one of the commandments, which I'm also paraphrasing, fair probably incorrectly. Nationalists have endeavored to see that as being a racial doctrine, that thy mother and thy father are not precisely your parents, but rather your ethnos as a whole. And if I were to be, the dictator of America and had say over its religious doctrine, I would definitely appeal to that kind of interpretation.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
But again, these can be taken out of a nationalistic context without much difficulty. Christianity does have uh, does have doctrine that is very open to the liberal point of view, and that is dangerous. That is something the right has to contend with. Our most vocal critics uh, will look at the Christian right and say, well, how can you believe that when the doctrine itself is universalist? It is egalitarian. How do you contend with that? And that's why you have, say, and I know this is slightly tangential, but that's why you have a resurgence of pagan,
yeah. I
of
was. Oh,
hmm?
sorry. Go ahead. Oh no,
Yeah,
no. I
yeah,
was. I,
people.
I was gonna bring that up too. Yeah, that's absolutely.
Yeah, of people who believe in paganism, or at least profess that they believe in paganism. It's very difficult to say whether there's a genuine belief there. I'm
Right,
not
right.
entirely sure myself, but you definitely see people who say, "Well, if I'm going to believe in any religion, I'm going to choose to be a Nordic or a Hellenist or something, because at least that is tied to an ethnos in a way that modern Christianity is not." And is that really a productive way of restructuring society? Should we say try to do a mass campaign to convert everyone to paganism? On that end, I disagree. I don't think that would be a very effective or efficient use of our time.
Yeah, I
It
don't
would
think it'd be tenable to do so
either, yeah, it
either.
would not be
Yeah.
tenable either in any meaningful way, because for one, I don't think the people who claim to believe in paganism actually believe in it in the same way that somebody who is Christian believes in Jesus and God. Um, I and it's very difficult to have a genuine faith built around people who choose to believe it or say they believe it simply for ideological reasons. That is a difficult task to
Yeah,
concede.
yeah. I've made this. I know. Rain was a meeting, so he probably wants to jump in here. But just real quick,
Hmm.
I have made the point before that people when talking with pagans and I do understand, like I understand the arguments they make, right? Like as you just laid out, I do understand them. However, you do have to still contend with, millions, tens of millions of Europeans, of whites who do actually, really believe in God, right? And
Hmm.
I do myself believe in God. But it's like on an even deeper level. There are people that are very very religious and see. I mean, I have members of my family that are far more devout than I am, sadly. But I mean, for me, I admittedly probably not a very very good Christian, but although I'm not an absolute degenerate. I just want to make that clear. Want to make that clear. But yeah, so I would say that I understand the arguments, and I've tried to relay that point as well to people, that there's an aspect that people actually believe, right? So it can't
Hmm.
just be functional, as we were talking about earlier. There needs to be something metaphysical and something of a higher that represents something greater beyond ourselves.
Yeah, and whether we like it or not, Christianity is the religion of the hearth. It is the European religion.
Yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah.
no there's no actual genuine communities out there who have any kind of mainstay authority who are not Christian in Europe. I mean, there are a few novel, I guess, pagan movements. You hear about
Yeah,
them every
sure.
now and then, but
Yeah.
they dwarf in comparison to the cultural fidelity that Christianity provides.
Yeah, I'm really aching to bite into the
Yeah,
pagan
yeah,
argument
let's hear
because
it.
I saw something really funny today. I hope the person doesn't see this. I don't remember who it was. It was a retweet from a mutual. It was like
Yeah.
something. It was a tweet like this: "We pagans are too split. We need our own Council of Nicaea." And it's like, of course you split.
That's
Of course pagans are split.
right.
It was all even before the modern times. Paganism was a split way of worship. It was a
Mhm.
regional thing, and even it was even more particular than regional. That's why it's so hard to find all these what paganism really was, because it was so regional, so particular, that well, most of it goes away, most of it falls, but and through the it's drowned by the waves of history. And going back to the idea of Evo's map, when you want to bite into paganism, when you want to be a pagan, you're basically taking up this tarnished map and you're looking at it and you're like, whoa, this map is really cool. My ancestors probably saw this map. But now you're looking at it and it's all tarnished. Maybe you can see like a little word and you think, whoa, this word is really cool. I really like this word. I would really like the idea of fire.
Yeah.
I always like fire. So paganism and fire. Well, yeah, fire, fine. What are you gonna do with that fire? Where does the fire lead you? And I'm being obviously very critical of it, and I
Yeah.
know that there's a lot of study into it. There's a lot of focus, and I've always been one of those types in the dissident sphere where um, uh, pagans and Christians should be friends or should see past their differences. And I believe that. I really believe that because there's bigger
Yeah.
problems and there's bigger things that unite us than divide us.
Yeah.
So so that's where I stand on it. I believe every dissident has gone through his own phase of paganism. I'm gonna get hate for this because I'm calling it a phase like there were some emos or some but
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah. No,
Um
but you're
yeah,
right. I mean, I think you're right. I think that you're right about that.
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I
so
agree.
so
We all go through that time period where we're
we
overly
go, and I
critical
went
of
through it.
religion.
I also
Huh?
went through it, especially reading
Yeah.
Evo. I was crazy
It's
on it.
like, well, Christianity, this is bullshit. This is ruining
Yeah, yeah,
Europe.
yeah. You really go through that.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
really go through that with, especially if you come from a, maybe if you, I don't know, maybe if you come from a really extremely religious household, it would be,
Mm.
it.
Kind of
I guess it
difficult to.
depends on the person. I come from a Catholic background, but my household was never really into it. I was baptized and all of that, but
Same. So I'm not
when
going
I
to hell at the very least.
Yeah. Yeah. Me
yeah.
too.
So I guess when you get one shotted by Evola or by this paganism, and you're like, whoa, my mind is open. My ancestors are connecting straight to my brain right now.
Right.
I'm hearing the
Right.
voices
Right.
of the ancients. I see the visions
They're
in the fire.
speaking to me. Yeah. Yeah. Through
Yeah,
fire and
yeah.
blood.
So it's a really interesting thing. It's a really interesting form of worship, and to its merit, I believe some of it was lost in modern times. And pagans are right. Pagans are right in that aspect. And Joseph Campbell says something really funny in the book Myths to Live By. He was a student of Jung, and he was the
Yeah.
editor for the
Mm.
the Penguins edition of Pocket Jung or something like that, where it's the compilation
So,
of his different works.
yes.
I really like that
Yeah.
book.
Yeah. I know which one you're talking about. I forget the forget.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's a
and
collection.
Campbell, yeah, it's the collection exactly. And Campbell says that, well, all, and he goes to the, I believe, the Americans to the Indians in the Americas. It says that, or was it to the Eskimos? That's a swear now. You can say Eskimos wherever. He goes to one of these tribal peoples, and he says that, well, in modern times, no, in ancient in these people in this with these people, you have the shaman, and when the kid goes through his crisis, he goes into the ice globe and he stays there for like a week. He doesn't really drink much, and he goes through this process of vision, and maybe he becomes a shaman, maybe he becomes something else, but his psychosis has meaning. It's cured. The symbol, he is able to overcome his psychosis through this symbol. And paganism has that a bunch because it's so
Yeah.
particular that it connects to the people of the region.
Mhm.
And Catholicism
Definitely.
does that with the saints. You have, for example, Saint Brigid of Ireland. That's the big one where this idea comes from, because it was
Yeah.
this pagan goddess or pagan or local figure that is turned
Mm.
into a saint, and how much of it is real, how much of it is a myth or whatever.
No,
It was
it's a
used to
very
connect with the
common
population.
criticism on Catholicism. Sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to add that quickly.
Go ahead, go
Of
ahead.
Catholicism by Protestants, that it's just paganism because the saints are semi-deified figures. They're
Yeah,
gods in their own right.
right, and it's idol worship, and yeah, that's very common here in America.
Yeah, but I really like that about Catholicism, not the worship of the saints, because the saints are respected, and you pray to the saints for intercession. I guess it's like it's a funny way of here goes the Catholic being a really worshiping his saints or whatever. But
Yeah.
but it's just to show that, well, Orthodoxy also has the saints, I believe. Particularly, I believe Saint Nicholas is really an Orthodox saint. I'm gonna get
Yeah, I
flamed
think
for this,
Well,
but
very,
all
very
I don't think
Americans
I
important.
know
am.
Saint Nicholas. He gives
Yeah,
us
I believe
gifts.
I
He's
always see his
just
icons when I go to Orthodox places in Poland. So I connect Saint Nicholas with Orthodoxy. I don't know how right that is, but but this to say that, well, Orthodox Christianity has this very particular aspect, very regional, with the patriarchs and the Orthodox of Ukraine and with Russia. But Catholicism has this with the saints, and that's why I really like the saint aspect of Christianity. In Poland, and then you have the patriarch saints of each city, so you get this connection to the saints that really connects you to the religion as a whole. And that's why I really hate the criticism from the Protestants of the saint worship, because, well, it's connecting to the people. It's that's the main point of it. But going back to what my idea of Joseph Campbell and why I brought it up is that, well, the kid goes into the little igloo or to the cave, and he goes there and he goes through his process of mystical understanding, and he cures his psychosis. And that's because he is able to connect to a deeper truth, to his shamanistic, or to his this pagan version of worship of religion, to the animals, or he then gets this spiritual animal like a Patronus from Harry Potter or whatever. I'm
yeah.
being mean.
It's
I'm being
it's
mean.
it's very similar to it's just to say real quick. Yeah, it's similar to like the American Indians, right? That they go in
Yeah,
and yeah, and although I think there might be like psilocybin mushrooms eaten, or maybe I don't know.
yeah,
Never
yeah.
mind.
There
I'll
is, there is,
just
there is.
Yeah, there's a
yeah,
No, no, you're right. You're right.
drug-induced faculty to it.
yeah.
Yes, there is,
Which
there is.
yeah, or like mescaline. Yeah, something. One of those
Yeah, it's
psychedelics that
part of
I
it. It's
know
part of it.
nothing about, of course.
I'm also not well versed in it. I read it with Joseph Campbell, but that I'm using it as an
I know
example
a
to say
bit,
that.
actually. Oddly enough, I have to confess, I did mushrooms once, so you can judge me at your own leisure.
No,
Oh,
no,
Why not?
I've done it. Yeah, several times as
you
well.
Americans and your drugs.
Yeah, we're a
What can
bunch
we
of
say?
Philistines.
We're drugged up people. I've only done it once though. I'm not I'm not an addict, not yet.
Yeah,
But
I'm
yeah,
straight edge. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. I don't smoke.
that's based
I
as
am
well.
high
You
on
got to keep
life.
it
that
up.
is based. Yeah, that is based.
But
Y-
to put it more succinctly, about the rites of passage for the Amerindian people, it does differ from region to region. The modern iteration of it, you have the peyote religion, which is actually a syncretist religion that uses Christian elements with the nativist ideas about rites of passage through drugs. They they use peyote, obviously, which is a hallucinogen of some sort.
Yeah.
The mushrooms, psilocybin was traditionally used in Mesoamerica, not in the North. In the North, it was
Oh,
generally
okay.
tobacco, and tobacco itself was a lot stronger. It was a prominent hallucinogen before the modern cultivar that
Right.
turned it into just, I guess, a vague stimulant.
Yeah, the
Uh,
pure, probably like pure tobacco crop.
yeah,
I imagine that there's was different, and the organisms have sort of differed over time.
but the idea of doing this, and in American culture, we have this like you find your spirit animal and so on. It was not that's not really a common universal Indian sort of idea. That's more of a Hollywood fiction. These tobacco, psilocybin, these kinds of drug induced euphoria were part of these ritualistic healing aspects. So you had them at coming of age ceremonies and also just in general medicinal contexts. But I guess this is all to say that it wasn't also uncommon in Europe to use drugs, at least in pagan religions, and
I didn't know that.
maybe that part of the mysticism appeals to certain people, certain pagans, because they're like, oh well, there's a perennial aspect to pagan religions, and you could say that the Indian religions are pagan. I would say that they at least have some resemblance to European paganism. And I think Rain touched on this, that there's a lot of regional variation. This is true, but they have similar commonalities between all of them. And that rite of passage is also found in the nativist European, at least from the sources of pre-medieval time that we can read. We talk about Hellenism, the Roman rites of passage, the Nordic religion. I'm not well versed in Nordicism, but there were similar ideas about something you had to conquer, something you had to conquer spiritually to become an adult, and maybe that also appeals to the
War,
modern.
like war, yeah, like war for men, or childbirth for
Hmm.
women, that kind of thing, or
Yeah.
a hunt. Like, I mean, I believe, and not to get off on a tangent, but I believe, yeah, hunting was incredibly dangerous in those times. So if
Depending
you
on what you had to catch, yeah.
Right, yeah. So if you survived a hunt, then as a boy, it was, if there wasn't a war on, that you were kind of looked at as a man, from what I understand. I'm like I said, I have no great depth of knowledge on this either, but yeah, that makes sense though.
No, I find it interesting. The ideas of sort of the Indian experience has captivated Europe for a very long time. There's a famous anecdote about what was the fellow's name? I can't even remember at this point. He was some alchemist who worked for Queen Elizabeth and the Aztecs. He learned that they did their divination with obsidian mirrors, so he brought back an obsidian mirror for her to uh,
Huh.
to use, and whenever she had to do some sort of grand political scheme. So yeah,
Right,
that was the 14 or 1500s. So
right. Yeah,
we
that's
talk
interesting.
about the appeal of the Orient just a moment ago, but
Right
at
now
some
we're
time there was an appeal of the Occident, the further
right.
Occident
Right,
too.
yeah, the boundaries beyond Europe in the New World. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Just to finish up, the idea of drugs in these rituals is really debated. The importance of it. I mean, for example,
Hmm.
Evo said that, well, you shouldn't depend on it. Evo says that I believe in arrows and the mysteries of love, or those long titles. I believe he
Yeah.
says that you shouldn't depend on it. And even in Introduction to Magic, I believe he also mentioned that. Jung is a little more. He says that avoid it. And then Joseph Campbell goes ahead and says that, yeah, use it. It's part of it. Go ahead, try. If it does something to you, yeah, sure. But my main point is this analysis of shamanism as this connection to cure this psychosis, because
Hmm.
Joseph Campbell, to finish the point, argues that this cures the psychosis because it goes at the core of it and says that you're having this and you have to go past it. Well, in modern times, we refuse these rituals. We think that they're funny and goofy things, that it's for the low classes and for gypsies, or for the Roma people or whatever. And and then particularly women go through this moment of psychosis, and they can never cure them, because first off, it's an industry, the psychological industry of you have to go to a psychologist instead of going to your priest, because, well, the psychology is science. So go
Yeah.
ahead and waste
Oh
40,
yeah,
40 euros in this session.
psychotherapy. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're refusing shamanism and refusing this deeper truth, and what you're doing is dragging the problem. So yeah, shamanism is funny, and it's really esoteric, and it's done by the Roma people, and by the gypsies, and by the Indians in America, and by the Indians even in, for example, the Orient. But but there's also this deeper truth that it's complete. When you reject it completely, when you make fun of paganism in Europe, for example, you also are somewhat rejecting this, which is this ritualistic aspect that targets this idea of psychosis, and says that you're having this psychosis, and maybe it could be a spiritual thing. And Jung, of course, argued as well that this is a really important aspect of the psyche. He particularly goes into the way of his how his patients sometimes would have this particularly characterization of their problems. For example, there's this I've read, I believe, in the Pocket Jung edition edited by Joseph Campbell, where he says that there was this lady that thought she had a snake in her belly, or there's this lady that connected to the that bug. I know the name in Portuguese, but I'm forgetting
I
forgetting it.
vaguely, yeah, I vaguely recall that. Yeah, I vaguely
Where's
recall it.
the
Hmm.
Egyptian bug, the
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 scarab.
bug, the scarab? Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
then it says that, well, our problem manifested in this way because it's connected to a deeper truth of the symbol of the scarab. And when you reject this idea of the symbol that's associated with shamanistic religion, you're rejecting also a way to cure our problem, and you're dragging it. You keep dragging it, and you keep motivating these predatory industrial complexes. But 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 then you never cure your psychosis, because you completely reject religion. You think it's money, it's a Ponzi scheme. You think it's predatory, or it's completely weaponized. I argue that it's somewhat weaponized. Of course, I don't believe it's completely weaponized, because religion, I believe in the deeper truth of religion, of course, and I believe in the potential it has, but it's weaponized to a certain degree, and most people right now reject it as being totally weaponized, or being a money scheme or whatever. And that's why I bring up this idea of Joseph Campbell and the shamanistic side of things. I really want to get into Wiswin's point about state religion before we go on. I'll just
Yeah.
ask if you
Well.
guys want to finish up this shamanistic
Yeah, no, I wanted
thing.
to say one more thing
Yeah.
on the whole shamanism. I think there are some people who may view what I'm saying as sort of a complete repudiation of paganism or shamanistic belief, because I've sort of made fun of it a little bit. I've said that pagans don't believe in it and whatnot. But in actuality, I have to agree with Campbell. I do believe that it is important for the sake of curing psychosis, for the sake of um, becoming a whole person. That if somebody wants to go through the process, if somebody wants to, say, do a hallucinogen, particularly one that's non-addictive, and most of them aren't, I actually advocate for it. I know
Yeah.
that a lot of people on this side of the sphere are straight-laced, and Rain, I know you mentioned that you are, and I think that's very admirable. I also don't drink.
Yeah,
I'm not a drinker, so. But I think that there is something lost when we no longer have the capacity to use these kinds of tools, these drugs, if you want to say, as part of a ceremonial ritual. I think it would be important, and I think that is something I would advocate for in a
Yeah.
neo-religious sense.
Yeah,
But
I can't say I have any problem with most of hallucinogenic things like that. I they're and you are right. Most of them they are non-addictive, and people don't go around. It's not something that you do, and I don't want to make this a whole thing, but yeah, I've done some various hallucinogenic substances, I guess, and yeah, it's not something that is, and I didn't do it for any sort of spiritual purposes. I just would add, it wasn't a ceremonial thing. It was just kind of youthful. I don't know, youthful fun, I guess.
youthful leisure, yeah, recreation.
Right. Yeah, recreationally. Yeah, and so I would say, yeah, I don't have any sort of great issue with it. However, yeah, I wouldn't be at all opposed to that. I don't think that I don't think that there's anything wrong with it, and it's not something that people this isn't something that people use every day. And I would not advocate for doing something like that every day. But in general, it's just not something that is like used on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And the shamanistic aspect is very important to my worldview on this issue. I think that if it's going to be an exploration of something spiritual, then it is a beneficial thing to do.
Yes,
And the
yes.
symbolism, and we've talked about therapy in the past, and I find the therapeutic pharmaceutical industry to be more parasitic than it is anything useful. And if well, my perspective is similar to what Rain said. You just drug people. You don't give them the power to actually succeed, to conquer their issues. You drug them and hope that, I guess, they'll survive another few days without killing themselves, I suppose.
Yeah, and then you
Which,
send them on their way.
yeah, then you send them on your way. They pay you some money. They get some drugs that'll
Yeah,
dull up their brain and whatever.
yeah. And we've
The
we've talked about
reason,
this before. Oh,
yeah,
sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, the reason why psychedelics and those kinds of one-time use drugs are more appealing is because they are kind of just one-time use. That's and there is a sort of resurgence in the modern therapeutic world, although it's not as strong as our
Yeah.
adherence to SSRIs and whatnot
Right.
to try to
Right. Like
use the
ketamine to
yeah.
I've heard of a bunch of, just real quick. Yeah, a bunch of different like, well, not to Joe Rogan talks about DMT, which is oh, I forget the
I
name
was
of it,
gonna
but it's
mention Joe Rogan and DMT.
Y-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and ayahuasca is frequently. And I actually knew a buddy of mine who went to Mexico to do that, and it worked, and it was used to cure. He claims it worked to cure opiate dependence. So I mean, there is something to be said for this, not losing this sort of not to go too far into it, but to have kind of this exploratory spirit still. I think that
Yeah, and
that's
I think,
important.
yeah, I also don't want to go too far into it because it is sort of tangential to the main topic of discussion. It could merit its own discussion in the future on the pharmaceutical industry,
Yeah,
um,
definitely.
Just
but
I'm just
sorry,
gonna, you wanna, yeah, sure.
no, go on.
Yeah, okay. I'm just gonna give it one last hit, and then if you guys want, we can go back to the state religion thing,
Yeah,
because I
yeah,
really
yeah.
like my opinion on that.
It
So
sounds good.
last point on DMT and Joe Rogan. the my It's interesting because you guys talked about it, and of course there's this rite of passage, and usually connected to these certain states of amplified cognition, or uh, or something, or just uh, a relaxed state also, depending on whatever the right of or is, and wherever the drug is. But let's not forget that I believe a large portion of the people that want to try these drugs, that in modern times they want to try shrooms, or they want to try DMT, they hear it from Joe Rogan. They I believe a large portion are actually just they just want to see the, how is it called, the elves, the DMT elves that see them,
Yeah,
and
Yeah,
then talk to
Yeah,
you
go
and
through
give
the
you
tunnel and
I
There
all
is
that.
there
yeah,
is an
go through the
unfortunate
tunnel and you
hedonism
see
to it.
yeah, it's I don't think it's just hedonism. Let me get
Mhm.
to it. I think it's gonna be a spicy take, yeah.
Okay, let's
But
hear it.
you see the pain. You know that author that everybody says that he did drugs and then he saw these figures with the red and blue and they had these eyes and it was a
Mm.
really
Yeah.
almost an angelic thing. And it's interesting and I call it angelic because well what's the people that are doing these drugs they don't want to see the elves they don't really want to see them what they want to see is the certain manifestation of a higher truth and that isn't given to them right now or it's not appealing to them right now through the church
Right.
religion. So they gravitate towards this mysticism of the drug or of DMT of ayahuasca, where they see it online. They see Joe Rogan talking about it, and he goes like, "I took DMT, and then I saw these elves walking around, and one talked to me and said that if you shave your head twice a day, you're gonna start seeing the bigger picture in life. You're gonna get
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
podcast on Spotify with a big deal." And people hear it and they're like, "Well, my life is fucking meaningless. I'm laid in bed all day. I don't believe in truth because I spend my day on Reddit, and Reddit says that there's no truth besides watching pornography all day. So let's try ayahuasca, and let's see how it goes." And then they take it, and then some go insane. And why are they going insane? Well, some it has, of course, the material aspects on the brain and on the body. For example, weed or cannabis or marijuana. um, but it's also getting one-shotted by this idea of an higher truth that it's not given to them at all. For example, especially from people that have no relationship with religion from the family side, that they have been completely cut off from religion since birth because their family is an atheist redditor family. They're and then they get one-shotted by it, and then they can't take it. They go insane, or they get they become literal
Yeah.
schizophrenics, like
Yeah.
clinically.
Hmm.
So I
Weed,
believe there's
weed
an
is. I'm very anti-weed. I think we're seeing lots of higher rates of schizophrenia because of weed. But anyhow,
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, no, that's a great point, and I believe that I believe it's actually being amplified by now. Finally, people are raising actual attention to it. Besides memeing it about being, oh, it's better than cigarettes. Yeah, fine,
Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
It's
Who
only
cares if it's
better
better
than
than
cigarettes
cigarettes?
in the sense that cigarettes will tar your lungs. It has an actual deleterious physical effect on you.
Right.
Mm,
But cognition-wise, I think weed is much. It also smells worse. So I personally
Yeah.
don't like.
Yeah.
yeah,
I do
yeah,
smoke. I do smoke cigarettes, but I
yeah, but
gave it up. But
that's a vibe, yeah. For the right wing,
yeah,
that's a
It's a
vibe.
it's a
vibe,
vibe.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing it for aesthetics. Although, I've been doing it for before I was in the right wing. So I was doing it before. Never mind. I'll stop talking.
No, the cigarettes actually brought you to the right wing. Yeah,
Yeah, there we go.
It's
There we
they give
go.
you
Yeah, exactly.
testosterone, right? That's what I hear. They
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But just to touch on that again, um, I lost it a bit. I guess everyone has the antidote of the friend that starts smoking weed around high school, and then like 3 or 4 years later, he continues to smoke weed, and then he goes from that happy-go-lucky guy that's actually a really fun guy to talk with, and his brain is all fried up. And he just he doesn't
Yeah.
think about weed, but he's
Mhm.
really slow. It's like instead of being a boxer for 4 years and actually having being justifiably destroyed in the head because you took a few punches to it and your brain got messed up. You got messed up because you just smoked weed. And it's like, well, at least you could have been a boxer, I guess. But
Right.
that's what I
Right.
stand
You would
on.
have accomplished
That's my
something.
last
Yeah.
point on. Yeah, that's my last point on the whole. I guess we've moved past shamanism into just the drug aspect of it. But that's my
Yeah.
whole point on it. If you guys want to comment again, yeah, well, let's go for it, and then we can finish up, or just touch on the topic of state and religion for a quick bit. It's up to you.
Yeah, yeah. Let's segue into the kind of state and religion. I think I think the pharmaceutical and substance discussion actually would be a good conversation for another stream here, another recording. But yeah, as nationalists, like I was saying earlier. or as the various ideological strains of thought in nationalism, whether you're a fascist or whatever, right? The state does have to be, as I was saying earlier, kind of it has to be the arbiter of everything, and I mentioned earlier, within civil society, within governance, and as Anglos, I realize, and Europeans, Western Europeans in general, like I do realize there's an aspect that's different from, like, let's say, Slavs, and there's nothing against Slavs, great people. Obviously, I have much to admire about the Slavic peoples, but the sort of Western European, or the Faustian man, I think, is sort of, you can't necessarily confine him entirely within the state, right? I mean, because without that, you wouldn't have gotten these sort of these great feats of glory and conquest, and like exploring, the will to infinity, as Spengler called it, I believe, right? So, but I still think that the state still needs to be the final arbiter, and I think, liberalism and its sort of rejection of any statist, or just kind of its amplification of, like, the political ontology, like an anarchist sort of ontology, right, or a liberal political ontology, is completely antithetical to what we need, for one, and also, like, just as far as a worldview. So I think that, yeah, the state, that's my one qualm with, for example, the Catholic Church. I like almost everything about the Catholic Church, except for, because we do not live under this united Europe anymore, right? There's not, the Holy Roman Empire is long gone, and because there are sort of differences, and again, that we talked about last time, that perhaps there does need to be at least blocks of state religion that's sort of reflective of the character of whatever ethnos that block is within.
Yes, yes. So let's target that, and let's really target it. And I'm gonna push aside my Catholicism. And here goes the Catholic pushing aside his religion when it's convenient. But let's
But,
let's let's
but I would just say one other thing, that, and this is the last thing, and then you guys can take it away. The one thing I would say is my sort of ideal sort of state, like, religious doctrine, would be pretty much identical to Catholicism, but it wouldn't be necessarily, I
What
don't know
about
if
the Pope?
yeah, right. I don't know if subservient is the right word, but yes, without the Pope, because the Pope does act as sort of the final arbiter on these issues, when I think it should be the state, and reflective of the ethnos, the culture, the blood memory of the people within that state, or the
Yeah.
ethnos.
No, and before Rain speaks, just so that I can just a quick statement. I think that a lot of the issues with Catholicism, and a lot of the critiques come from things that the Pope says. The Pope right now is quite liberal, quite progressive, and I don't like the things he says. I think that what he says is just more shit lib slop. It's not conservative. It's not what I want to see in, I guess, a right wing doctrine. So I've always, I don't know how Catholics defend, not being, that the Pope is the ultimate authority, while he also says these things which are egregiously liberal. But anyways, yeah, go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, I'm not gonna play Catholic apologetics right now. I'm gonna keep it tight. So
Mhm.
it's like this. I'm gonna push aside my Catholicism, and I'm gonna going straight to I view politics. And I've discussed this with Win, actually. If I believe it has already been years ago, maybe it has been such a long time. But I was
Yeah.
reading.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it has been quite a bit. It has been quite a bit. So it's informed by the social contract of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, where he basically discusses the idea of religion within the state, and we know that there's Rousseau has this focus on the collective united state,
Popular
and he
the
basically
general
argues
will, yeah.
about, yeah, the general will, and that's the a big point of it, and but I'm going to push past it as well, and because I want to target what comes after it, and that's the main point I want to bring. But he says that, well, there should be this state religion. If there's this state and it's supposed to be a collective state, there should be this collective religion that makes the citizen respect and follow the general will, and guides the citizen into protecting and defending the honor of the state, or of the nation, if you want to call it. And then he made this comparison because he didn't really like Christianity that much, because of course the figure of the Pope, of this outside influence. So that's fun, in the sense that Rousseau is always hated by the right, and somehow he has this very nationalistic side. He's very nationalistic. Rousseau is an amazing thinker. I really like Rousseau, even if everybody hates him.
You've
But
done
whatever.
some good work on Rousseau. I must commend you on it. You know, sort of reshaping Rousseau in a different light. So
Yeah,
I
I think
definitely
there's a
commend you.
good place
Yeah,
for people like Rousseau, even if they use more liberal terms like the social contract. I still
yeah.
like Hobbes. I know that's an issue. That's a terrible baggage that I have to wear, but I still like Hobbes.
Yeah.
But the idea of the social contract is really abstract, and it will be an awesome discussion to discuss, to debate
Hmm.
how also the social contract should be viewed, because the liberal side of it is one thing, but then you have the Rousseau side of it, or even the Hobbesian side of it, and these are not compatible at all. Rousseau hates Hobbes; he hates him, which is fun, and well, we can debate that another time. But my point is we have this nationalistic religion, this state religion, and then Rousseau goes on, and because he hates Christianity, he goes on and says that, well, during the Roman era, we had the figure of the United Republic, or the United, yeah, I think it was a republic he mentions. He's also influenced a lot by Sparta, for but but he's also influenced a lot by the Roman Republic, and that's his main influence, of course. So it's this state religion, or this focused. And if it's not a state religion, Rousseau says that, well, let's have tolerance of religion. Everyone can believe what they want and can have their own religion. But here's the point, and here's where he rejects pluralism, and remains this state first, or this nation, or this general will first, which is, you can have the religion you want, but you follow the general will, and if your religion goes against it, you're out. And by out, he means really out, and it's just not exile. It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
uh
Death,
Permanent
it's
permanent
perhaps.
it's
out.
permanent out. It's permanent out. If you believe your God, you're gonna go meet him. If you believe him when you shouldn't, or if you believe something that
Right.
goes against the general will.
Yeah.
uh, and that's the interesting point, and that's a very interesting point. And I'm sounding like Jordan Peterson because I'm not really giving my opinion on it. I'm just saying it's interesting, yeah. But whatever. then I go on. Then let's bring Evo into this, and let's bring the Pope as well, and because the Pope has the title of the Pontifex Maximus, and I've talked about this. And Evo says that this title belonged to, or means, uh, um, a bridge maker. And what's this bridge? Well, the Pontifex Maximus was the title, I believe, given first to. It wasn't given first to Octavian during the. I believe the Pontifex Maximus existed. The Pontifex Maximus existed before, but then Octavian, when he rose to in and brought about the empire, he gained the title of Pontifex Maximus from the priest. I'm not sure. I'm not sure on that, but whatever. That's not the main point. So the Pontifex Maximus is he who in this analysis, and Evo is really good on this. Evo is really good on this. Is he who links the nation to the divine, and that's an amazing point. And we have that figure of the Pope in Catholicism, and that's the Pontifex Maximus. And well, you can have the problem with the Pope being outside, but what you can have a problem with, or you can have a problem with that, but what I don't have a problem with is the idea of the figure in that builds the bridge between the nation and the divine. And we can talk about the emperor being that, or we can talk about the representative of the state, or we can talk about the state itself being the Pontifex Maximus. And that's where I stand on the question of 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 state religion. And everywhere, just to finish up, he has this when talk, I believe it's in Spiritism as well. That's such a boring book to read, I'll be honest. It's such a boring book, took me a while, but has these little gems written throughout. Because it's boring because it goes over a lot of religions, and if you don't care about one, you're gonna get bored. But whatever. He has this antidote, which is during fascist Italy, I believe. I don't know if it was the lady that created Theosophy, but there was this Theosophy meeting in fascist Italy, and Neville attended it, and he said that we should have these meetings because it represents the superiority of our faith, of our spirit, that we can have them and listen to them and be like, yeah, cool, you can talk, and you're still inferior to us because our values are above you, or something like that. The main antidote is that we're above you, so you can talk and you can discuss it, but we have this superiority that's innate to our way of viewing things, that you must respect if you're gonna debate with us. That's the main part of it. And I guess that's where I end up on the old discussion, which is, should there be pluralism of religion within the state? I believe there can be, and that's why, going back to the beginning of the discussion about the dissident right, I believe there can be a pluralism of religion within the dissident right, as
Yeah.
long as the
Mhm.
core beliefs of our sphere, or in the case of the state, as long as the core beliefs of the state, as long as the general will, I'm using it a bit bastardized because I'm not giving the right definitions, but wherever, as long as the general will is always respected. And if you're not respecting that general will, you're out. I don't care if you're a Christian, if you're Catholic, if you're
Right.
Orthodox, if you're a pagan, if you're an atheist, if you're not respecting the general will, if you're not respecting the main mission, and if you're not respecting our Pontifex Maximus, you're out. So that's where I stand on it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree. And earlier, I
absolutely.
described my view of state and religion as um, I used the term carefully. I said that I think the state should have a primary religion or should have some sort of religious primacy. And I do think that there is inevitably going to be multiple religions within a single society. I don't think that's avoidable. Even if we abandon our modernist
Yeah,
inclinations of multiculturalism, you're going to have various competing values, even within the same
definitely.
religion. You
Yeah,
can't avoid
definitely.
that. So when it comes to how the state should structure itself, yes, as long as that religious plurality, and to the extent that it exists within having a primary religion, so long as it does not infringe upon the social values necessitated by the primary ideology, then it's okay. Then it's acceptable. There are going to be religious minorities.
Yeah, and so I would conclude with this. I think the model, kind of the perfect model, is what Rain described in with Rousseau's thinking, and like you said, there it is unavoidable. However, you can have this big tent, but at the end of the day, once this is all sorted, there is going to be a hegemonic faith, right? And it's yeah, you have to abide by that, or like you said earlier, you're out. And I think this model was kind of best represented what we saw like with the NSDAP. I mean, you had pagan elements, you had sort of, and I realize this is like overstated, but you had elements of guys that were interested in the occult or whatever, and that's like blown way out of proportion. But nevertheless, at the end of the day, the Uncle Lay was he kind of clamped down on all of that, right? He made sure that the state is a state, and they kind of have the final say. So, did you guys want to end on here?
Yeah. yeah, let's end on there. Let's wrap it up,
Sure.
and I just want to finish up by saying that I guess we should thank our viewers. I guess thank our mutuals for
Yeah,
giving
let's
us
Thank
a
hope we
you.
didn't
listen.
make any enemies. Thank you. Don't hate
Yeah.
us. We love our Catholic, Protestant,
Yeah. We're
Orthodox
big
brothers.
Yeah,
Big Tent nationalism is
Big Ten
my
nationalism, indeed.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
we just like to have the philosophy debate about
yeah.
it.
Yeah. But I yeah, and I
Especially
think
about
it's
the
an
site. Yeah,
yeah, I think these questions are important. I mean, because this is, I mean, we are sort of they have to be discussed, right? The only way to break down the barrier and move forward, which is our only
Hmm.
goal, we have to keep moving forward. There's no going back because we have to discuss these things, and it's as simple as that. But all right, gentlemen. Yeah, thank you both for coming on, man. You guys are
thank you.
awesome, and you
Yeah,
guys
thank you for
always
having us.
do a great job. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end it, and yeah, we'll see you guys next time.